Welcome to the Honest Money Show. Thanks to our sponsor Bitaroo for making today's episode possible, Australia's biggest Bitcoin-only exchange. Hi Andrew, welcome to Honest Money Show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Welcome. I wanted to start with the low-hanging fruit. So you have over 30 years experience in traditional finance and you have recently learned a lot about Bitcoin. Well, I don't know how recently, but you really understand it. So you understand both sides really, really well. And that's why we wanted to have you on as a guest. So what can you tell us about the environment in Australia at the moment? Like how deep is the understanding of Bitcoin in traditional finance? Where are we at?
Oh, well, I know it's a hackneyed response, but we're so early. And it's, at least in my direct experience, it's still sniggered and laughed at, and it's not taken seriously at all. In fact, it's gotten to the point where my business has ostensibly got nothing to do with Bitcoin. I run a small cap private investment club, so it's all about equities. And obviously, like anyone who swallowed the orange pill, I can't shut up about it. But it does the business no favors. I think a lot of the time I'm just annoying the clients that we have because they joined to be serious investors. They did not join to talk about magic internet beans. And that's the stage that we're at. So I mean, baby steps. It is getting better. It feels like in the US, it's being talked about far more seriously in those circles. But in the Australian financial space, at least in my direct experience, it's not something to be taken seriously. Which is great. Which is great. Because if they all loved it, that the price would be much higher, which would mean that we don't have nearly as much opportunity as we do. So, I'm very fond of saying that from an investor, whatever you're investing in, you want something that is absolutely a winner, but that very few people recognize that fact. Because that's where the opportunity and the alpha lies. You want something that is really, absolutely here to stay and likely to be a very big part of the future, but for which no one recognizes that. If everyone loved Bitcoin, we'd be at $10 million a coin and it'd be great. The world would be a much better place, but you wouldn't have that asymmetric upside opportunity in terms of your purchasing power.
Yeah, it's interesting. I really thought this cycle was going to invite more retail. Instead, we've seen a lot of institutional investment and retail sector hasn't followed, at least not in Australia. But the people who do understand it, like I've recently met some boomers in Palm Cove during Bush Bash, and they are really starting to understand it. So they've spent majority of their life investing in property because that was the Australian store of value. And now they're starting to really understand Bitcoin. So they're like, okay, let me just sell one property and move some of that into Bitcoin. We've
Smart.
got 10 grandchildren, and they want to leave some Bitcoin for each one of them. So the people who do get it,
Well, I mean, that's the reward for doing the work and being early. Again, it's the same in stocks as well, right? Like if you can get to understand a business better than everyone else, it's such an incredible edge. And it takes work. And most people aren't prepared to do work, but those that are, there are great rewards for being able to think and act independently and in a non-consensus way. It's always been true. It just happens to be amazingly true with Bitcoin because the asymmetry is so wild. But yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you in terms of retail. So we're at near enough all-time record highs. We've more than doubled just in the last year alone. And I don't know about you, Anja, but I've had no phone calls from friends and family. A lot of them aren't even aware of where the price is at. And I honestly think it's good old Sam Bankman-Fried we can lay the blame at here because it just that whole debacle there. Because again, for most people, and this was true of me early on, I'm sure it was for a lot of people, like Bitcoin and crypto are synonymous. And I've often thought that everyone's instincts on crypto is right. right? Like it is a scam and a Ponzi and all of those things. But unfortunately, Bitcoin gets wrapped up in that. And things like FTX, and again, if you weren't following it closely, you were a distant observer, all it did was validate all those prejudices and biases. And it's even at the point now where the media is not like really picking up on it much as well. So it's just not in their face, and they're not aware of what's happened. And as far as they're concerned, it's all dead and dusted, and that's all in the past.
Yeah, that is so true. And it's interesting the point that you make about media because yeah, I follow Bitcoin very closely and I look at the performance of Bitcoin compared to everything else like Nvidia and S&P 500 and all of these things get a lot more airtime and
Yep.
Bitcoin gets none.
There,
Yet
there is a
it's
paradigm shift
consistently
happening out the window, and no one's watching it.
it's consistently outperforming everything. And like, how is it, how it just baffles me that people aren't at least curious enough to be like, okay, what's the big deal here? Why is this thing not going away? I feel like they're starting to be, but I'm just like, come on, people, hurry up. Just look at it. Just read a book.
It's funny because any gains that are seen in Bitcoin is entirely due to luck and the market being irrational. And whenever it falls down, that's the market being perfectly rational and your comeuppance and just desserts for gambling on such a silly, reckless thing. It's like even in my little circle and that, like, I've on Strawman, I have a position of Bitcoin there, and it's just you don't get any credit for that one. It's sort of like, yeah, it's up a lot, but you got lucky and it's temporary. Like it's up a lot, but it won't last, and it's only a matter of time before reality reasserts itself and you step on the rake, and all will be right with the world. So that's just the stage that we're at.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have started like last year in December, I just started talking about Bitcoin on LinkedIn and I do get a lot of criticism, unfortunately. And it is that sort of like people coming to tell me that it's greater fool theory, you're getting fooled here, you don't know what you're talking about. And I'm just quietly waiting, waiting for them to be proven wrong. And
Unfortunately, you can't use reason and logic. I mean, you can lead a horse to water, but and you can say, as you do, like read a book, take it seriously. I actually made the point just like an hour ago, speaking to a friend. It's like I don't care if you adopt it or don't adopt it or do whatever up to you. I've got no incentive to make you buy some or not buy some. All I am saying is before you dismiss it, look at it objectively with an open mind. And if you go through the process and it doesn't resonate or doesn't stick or just doesn't connect with you, then fine. That's no problem with that. My only problem with it is making a decision and forming not only an opinion, but a high conviction opinion on something you've not even bothered to look at. And yet you're so sure of yourself that you're correct. And maybe you are correct. But how can you possibly say that without having done one modicum of work? And it's the what's the name of the phenomenon where like the less you know about something, the stronger your opinion is? Dunning-Kruger
Dunning-Kruger?
effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect, and it's real. And I think I'm kind of with Alan Farrington's view on this, which is you've got to stop trying to think that reason, logic, and the rest of it will convince people, and all you can do is just laugh and criticize at them. And that's like probably the best way to sort of like get people to sort of, eventually take a serious look at it, because you can't reason someone out of a position that they never reasoned themselves into to begin with.
Correct. Yeah, that's so funny. I have managed to orange pill all the important people in my life, so I feel like everything I
Well
wanted to
done.
achieve, I've achieved, and the people that mean a lot to me understand, or at least trust me enough to allocate a little bit into it.
Yeah.
But everyone else that I kind of tend to inspire to learn and read more about it, just a huge bonus for me.
Yeah.
So a little bit about learning. What was it that orange pilled you?
I Well, look. I try I don't know if this is true or not, but I like to pretend it's true that I'm someone who can be pretty flexible in their opinions. I'm very fond of the idea of strong opinions loosely held. And I had a very strong opinion on Bitcoin back in 2017. It was a very negative kind of opinion. And then it crashed in 2017 and everything was right with the world and my opinion was validated and I was right. And you forget about it, you move on and then wait a second, we're at another high and a higher high and it keeps going up. So it's sort of like at a point you can recognize that, well, whatever I thought, there's something going, I might still be right, but this is really weird. Something's going on. So that was the first time. This is sort of in the COVID, just post-COVID sort of era. I thought I better take a proper look and at least have an informed opinion before I try and crap all over it. And I think as anyone listening to this will know, there's so much great content out there, so many great podcasts and interviews and the rest of it. But I think it was the Lex Friedman, Michael Saylor podcast. I think it was a 4-hour podcast or something. And someone said you should watch it. And I thought, well, a podcast is an easy way to sort of, I can at least pretend to myself that I'm taking a proper look at it. And as we all know, Saylor's pretty bloody convincing. And so I was like, huh. And that made you think, well, that piqued my interest. Maybe I will listen to a few more of these. And so I think it was the Breedlove What Is Money series. I got into that.
So
then you start
good.
ordering
So
all the
good.
books. So good, right? And it's sort of like the most interesting thing about it, well, the least interesting thing about it was the number go up. And it was everything else about it that just really just, and this is not a unique perspective, and this is the perspective, I think the experience of all people who've gone down the rabbit hole is it rewired my entire brain. Where here I am, a guy who's worked in finance and whatever for 30 odd years, and I just never knew what money was. And it's so embarrassing to say that. I would have told you I knew what money was, and I would have thought at 12, I would have thought I knew what money was. But my evolution and understanding of money never went beyond that 12-year-old level. I do work, someone pays me money, and I can exchange it for stuff, and that's just what it is. What do you mean? It's not more complicated than that. But it's this thread that you start pulling on, and it kind of leads you into political science and then cryptography and then game theory and Austrian economics. Austrian economics to me was always this fringe libertarian weird kind of thing that no serious
love it.
economists, and then you sort of like, oh, that actually makes an obscene amount of good sense. And again, you go deeper and you go deeper. And I don't know about you, Anja, but I've not found the bottom of that rabbit hole yet. And I started off as cynical or skeptical, let's say, and then I got a little bit curious, and then I dipped my toe in the water, and then I'm fully submerged in the water, and now I'm just continuing to swim out to sea. It's like, give me as deeper water as I can possibly get into, because new doors just keep opening up, and just new profound realizations keep occurring to me, which is so beyond, number go up, that it's I think most people in my circle think I'm in some kind of weird cult because it's that obsessive at this point. Which I get.
We're sponsored by Big Bitcoin.
Yes. Yes. One of us.
Yeah, this is one of the things that I personally love about Bitcoin the most, because initially I just treated it as like an investment class. So I was like, sure,
Yes.
I'd get a little bit of exposure into it. And I was never like an investor. I was just a normal person who did their best to manage the money. I didn't bank with the the big four, sorry. I didn't accumulate debt. I didn't like credit cards. I was just very, very like safe. And my idea of investing was just investing in S&P 500, not trading, not speculating. And then I learned about Bitcoin, and now I view it, kind of like as a bit of a safer heaven than S&P 500. That's just my personal view.
The ultimate risk-free asset. That is the greatest irony in all of this, is that the thing that people think is the risk, if you drew out all the asset classes, fixed interest, cash, property, equities, crypto, you know, it's way up there. And ironically, the safest investment is fixed interest and sovereign debt. And then again, you go down deep enough the rabbit hole, and it's like, no. The riskiest thing you can possibly hold is government debt, and the safest thing is Bitcoin. And that's a hard hill to climb. And if you're listening to this and you're coming in cold, that's going to sound sacrilegious almost. But I fundamentally believe it.
Me too. Me too. And it takes a lot of reading to get there. It's not like you come to this decision overnight, and you shouldn't. You
No.
shouldn't. The conviction really grows from that depth of understanding. And I like that you said that, you worked in finance and traditional markets for over 30 years, not really understanding money. And that was, to me, one of the big eye-opening moments was when learning about money, learning about the history of money,
Yeah.
how money's naturally selected, why. Those are the sort of questions that helped me understand why Bitcoin is important and why it's worth looking at.
100%. Yeah. And it's one of those things that goes beyond just economics. I've always thought, if you're someone who cares about societal issues and fairness and all of that, you should care about economics, because it's how we kind of organize our society. And if you care about economics, you should probably care about the correct economics. And if you care about the correct economics, it leads you to a series of conclusions that are rather inescapable. And what's remarkable about it is also really shows the existing lens through which we view the economy and talk about the economy, measure the economy, and transact in the economy. It's just so arse backwards. and you really do see it as a complete clown world, and it's very hard to see. People have often given the analogy of trying to convince a fish that water is real, because it's hard. It's everywhere, and yet it's nowhere. And it's that kind of thing that I think makes all of this very difficult, but at the same time very valuable, in that it offers us a tool for financial self-actualization and just maximizing of human prosperity and societal harmony. And I get how hyperbolic all of this sounds, by the way, but again, I think that's all. I think all of those things are true.
I love that you said hyperbolic. One of the reasons that I decided to start a podcast was because I thought some of the American voices were very bombastic in the way that they explain Bitcoin. And turns out that I'm the same, just with an Australian accent.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's so great to see the Aussie Bitcoin scene really starting to flourish too, by the way. So it is when you go on, I mean, this is true of the internet and content in general. There's 300 whatever many million people in America. It is the Bitcoin capital of the world in terms of adoption. So you're going to get a lot of content there and a lot of brilliant content. But yeah, we need some voices from outside of the US, and so you're doing good work.
Yeah. And the other thing as well, people who are interested in crypto in Australia, they don't have the right guidance, and the influencers in this space are usually selling them courses and things to benefit themselves, rather than really teaching them about what is the difference between Bitcoin and altcoins, why one is safe, the other one is not. You kind of need to be an insider in order to make any money. You risk losing a lot of money, and a lot of people have lost a lot of money trying to time the market. And there have been instances where people told me oh, I invested in this coin and it 10x'd, and then I thought it was going to keep going up and I didn't sell, and now it plummeted.
That's a
And
story
these
as
stories are
old
very,
as
very
time.
frequent.
Yeah.
And I'm all for people making money. Do what you need to do. I'm never going to tell someone else how to, invest their money. I will try to caution people that investing in altcoins, for most people, usually ends spectacularly badly. I kind of had the same opinion, for most people, something like S&P 500 is a lot safer than trading individual stocks. So that's kind of the analogy that I use to try to, illustrate this point, but I even think altcoins are a lot more sinister than individual stocks. So,
They're a cancer. I mean, as I say to all my friends who are cynical on this stuff, it's just like your instincts are 100% correct. And it's just that you lump Bitcoin in with it. It's just different, And that's crazy. Like, what do you mean? It's obviously the same, right? Like, how can you separate this? And then it is hard to see because if you talk to the Ethereum people or the XR people, they'll say the same thing, right? So it's just like that cult likes that cult likes that coin, and they're all the same. And it's just so easy to reach that conclusion. So unfortunately, there's no shortcut to it. You've got to do the work and reach your own conclusions. But isn't it funny that anyone who has done the time and they've put the effort into it all reach the same conclusion? That's interesting. The other one is that once they've reached that conclusion, they never go back. Like you never meet a Bitcoiner who's like, yeah, it was interesting for a while, but now I've decided to pull back my exposure. Like it doesn't happen. And again, if you're on the outside and you're still trying to weigh all this kind of stuff up, that's just two data points that I think are quite interesting, right? If you think about just that alone, nothing else, it should encourage you just to scratch at the surface and dig a little bit deeper.
yeah. Do you have a favorite book in Bitcoin that you recommend to your friends and family?
Well,
I have a few.
I do. So my favorite is Bitcoin is Venice. I really, really love that.
Which one, sorry?
Bitcoin is Venice. It's Alan Farrington. It started as him and Sasha. I'm so sorry, I've gone blank on the name, but it started as a series of articles, and it's really more talking about, in a lot of ways, it's more about sound money than it is about Bitcoin, and it's more about capitalism, true capitalism, as opposed to anything else. But yeah, I don't actually recommend that to most people because it's a little bit. It's intellectually heavy. It's maybe a bit more. It's a bit harder to wrap your head around. I actually recommend Broken Money. I think that's a really good book because it's not. And Joe Bryant's. I know you had him on as a guest recently, and I recommend his video. What's the problem as well? Because both of those resources don't really touch on Bitcoin. Not in Lynn's case at the very end of the book. And in Joe's case, I don't actually think he overtly mentions it at all. And so it's a nice little sly way of slipping it into someone's consciousness. It's just like, hey, just think about this as a problem. And then Bitcoin just presents itself as a very obvious solution to it, rather than coming in hot and start talking about SHA-256 and private keys and public-private pair, all of that. That is throwing people into the deep end, and you're just going to confuse them. But if you can just sort of step back and say, just think a bit about money and what matters about money, most people will arrive at the same conclusion.
Yeah, for sure. I loved Lynn's book. If someone's not a reader, I won't recommend that one because it's like 528 pages long.
There is a half-hour YouTube video of the book that she's done it herself and or produced it and narrates it, and it's great. If you don't want to read the book, watch it's amazing how many times I've recommended that in Joe's video as well. It's like, I can't be bothered. It's like you spend however many hours a week working, to try and save money, but you won't, and you'll watch hours upon hours of reality trash TV, but you won't spend half an hour just to learn about one of the most fundamental coordination mechanisms in our modern economy and the very sort of underpinning of our society. But okay, it's just what people are like, I suppose.
Yeah. One of my big concerns and things that keeps me up at night is I very much feel like we're reaching a late stage fiat society where we don't have the economic energy that we had 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And cost of living in Australia is a really big and bad problem. And when people are so drained, they don't exactly have the motivation to go, let me go learn about this thing, that
Especially
might
if it
help me.
smells like it's crazy. Yeah.
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 Yeah, so I keep finding, like, I keep thinking, how can I reach these people enough, just enough to pique their interest and be like, okay, let me look into this thing. It's annoying, it's persistent, it won't go away.
Yeah.
What is it about this that I need to know? And I think, like you said, the Joe podcast is a really good starting point. It's very palatable. It's easy for anyone to understand. They don't talk about quantitative easing or fractional reserve banking, but they do, just
Yeah.
not using those words.
Yes. Yeah. It's great.
So it's easy enough for anyone to understand. And I
Yeah.
have heard of Lynn's YouTube video. I haven't watched it because I read the book. So I was like, that's
Yeah.
kind of my excuse. But I love the book. I actually listened to the audio, and I'll need to order the book because there are some charts in that I didn't get to see that she
Yeah.
referred to in the book. I was like, oh, I better come back to that. But I love, like, because I've read now a number of books that kind of follow a similar path to Lynn's, and that is, the problem and then the solution. But I
Yeah.
find each time I read a book, it's never a repetition of topics. I always learn something new, and there's
Yep.
always a different lens. And I love her take on Bitcoin, or sorry, money actually being at its core a ledger. And I remember we had an Australia-wide debate that went on for a month, whether this was true or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is kind of who we are as Bitcoiners. This is what we talk about. We talk about money for fun.
Yeah. And money,
I
I
don't
think
know where
that's
I
the
was.
other problem with it is that it feels like because it has had the appreciation it has, and because it is very specifically about money, it feels like it's almost a craven and a crass topic. It's like, yeah, you guys are interested in it because you just want to get rich. When Lambo, like that's, and it's not. It's quite hard for people to believe that there is a more noble. Maybe I'm kidding myself. I don't think so. Though there's a more noble calling that's here. It's like you come for the money, and you stay for the revolution. And that's definitely true in my case. If it was like, yeah, this looks interesting, I might buy a little bit. I'll invest in it. I'll take a position in Bitcoin, which I can't even say with a straight face these days. But yeah, it is so much more beyond all of that. And look, Anya, if you ever figure out some way to quickly and easily orange pill people, let me know, because I certainly haven't found it. It's very hard to do. The best advice I've had, it might have been Daniel Batten or someone I think I heard sort of say, is like everyone's got their own sort of pet topics and their own interests and the things that they sort of believe in. It's about, there is no universal orange pill. There's an orange pill for each person that's going to strike the right chord with them in a way that matters to them. So for example, I've got a friend, a really dear old friend from school, known him for 100 years. He's a hardcore lefty, works for the union movement, right? So he's never going to do Bitcoin because that's all for like hardcore capitalists and it's bad for the environment and rah, rah, rah. And so how do I orange pill him? By the way, just the other day, he took out all of his super and put it all into Bitcoin, 100% allocation.
Woo!
Yeah. And what it was, good on him. He's going to do so well. Good. What it was I presented to him a bunch of information from Daniel's website. Actually, it's a great resource just to sort of say, no, it's good for the environment, because that was what was going to work for him. And I've got other friends who couldn't give stuff about that, and that's never going to get them over the line. Probably ironically, the best marketing for it is number go up. And we all know it's sort of like, yes, that is nice. Let's not deny the obvious here. None of us is upset when that happens. But it's the one thing that no matter who you are or what stage of life you're at or whereabouts you are around the world, it's hard not to notice that at a point. People have done pretty well to avoid it through to now, but it does become pretty hard not to notice. And even if you are drawn to it for reasonably superficial reasons, i.e. when Lambo, we do know that when you if that's what it is that piques your interest and that causes you to start pulling at that thread, you'll come out the other end completely rewired and again on Team Bitcoin for the grander, more noble vision that it represents.
Yeah, what you said really resonates with me as well. I've had, countless conversations with my family who are very much on the left, and they think of me as this like right-wing nutter, but I'm not a right-wing nutter. I'm an extreme centrist, as one of my great friends calls me, just right of center economically, but, left of center when it comes to like values. I want everyone to be looked after, and I want us to
I'd say
have,
the same about
you
myself. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So I understand why it can be a bit alienating for those on the left. And this is another reason why I've started my podcast. So I was like, welcome. This is great for everyone.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because my auntie said to me, she's like, you talk about Bitcoin a lot. And, she said something along the lines of like, it's kind of like tasteless, quote unquote, tasteless to speak about money in that
Yeah.
way, because it is
Yeah.
very much like, it is crass. It is not a nice thing to like talk about money. But to me, when I talk about Bitcoin, I'm not talking about Bitcoin, the asset. I'm talking about Bitcoin, the protocol. That's what gets me excited. Obviously, Bitcoin, the asset, has done very well for me, and I want other people to learn about Bitcoin, the protocol, so they can potentially benefit from Bitcoin, the asset.
Yeah.
And yeah, but I do question as well, like, how do you appeal to people? Do you appeal to their greed? Do you appeal to their self-interest in order to get them to allocate a little bit? And then once, even if you have a small allocation, you kind of start
Yeah.
obsessing about it and following the
Yeah.
price and be like, okay, and then you want to know more about it. So I'm like, is that a sly roundabout way to get them to understand the revolution, the philosophy, the morality behind this magic internet money?
Yeah. We've almost got to be like a drug dealer, right? Whereas, the first taste is free. Have a little bit. Just have a little bit of Bitcoin. And because you know that once you have a taste of it, you want more of it, right? And I know that sounds it almost, I'm not being entirely serious, but it's not a terrible analogy because it's human nature. You're going to pay more attention to something where you've got a bit of exposure to, right? Like it's for the same reason that playing online poker with fake money is never ever the real thing. Because you are going to. I'm a brilliant poker player when it comes to play money. I'm an awful poker player with real money because it's different, right? And it's the same with Bitcoin. It's like you can watch it and observe it from the outside all you like, but once you have direct exposure to it, you're just going to pay a little bit more attention. And I actually think it's the other point that I try to hit on again just this morning, speaking to someone, making the case for it as I do. They didn't want to talk about it, but they were going to talk about it with me. And and they they almost approach it as in, well, if I like this thing or if I do this thing, I have to go all in. And I think, no, you don't. Like you could take a 1% position, a half a percent position, just something, just dip the toe in the water. And frankly, the asymmetry on this is so insane. I mean, I I'd be very sympathetic and understanding of someone who decides that they don't want to put 80% of their net wealth into Bitcoin, particularly if they're new on the journey, right? I get it. It feels crazy and reckless. But 1% is kind of at that point where, okay, maybe this is a pile of hot air and okay, it's 1%. That's like a daily fluctuation on anyone's portfolio. But if it's right, I mean, the upside is it, it, the total addressable market is probably $500 trillion in value. And we're at 2 trillion, right? So there's a 250x potential upside, whatever. You pick whatever target that you want, but it's a big target. Even if you say just all it does is replace gold, there's a 10x there. And what's the downside? I mean, I guess, well, the downside's 100% at the most extreme. So I could, heads, I lose my 1% position, I really don't notice it. Or tails, and I make a material difference to me and my progeny for now until the end of time. It's like, how do you not do that, right? I mean, I have had a friend push back on that argument before and say, well, by that rationale, I should buy every biotech hopeful because maybe they do invent the cure for cancer. And it's a good pushback, except, and I think it was an exceptionally good pushback if this was 2014, back when Bitcoin was young and fragile and a million things could have gone wrong with it. And thank goodness it didn't. in 2025, it's a spurious argument. When it's this weird thing on Silk Road, and yeah, okay, maybe. When it's a $2.5 trillion asset held by hundreds of companies, Fortune 500 companies, listed companies, when the president of the United States just bought $3 billion worth, and sovereign nations are acquiring it, and Larry Fink at BlackRock is there on CNBC telling you how great this is. Like, at this point, this is no longer the moonshot specky penny stock that might do it. This is more akin to an Apple that has now on the second iteration of the iPhone. Yes, it's still relatively early in its overall journey, but we're well beyond the point of it just being a crap shot that may or may not pay off. So that's the part that I wrestle with. I completely have, particularly in my world and with the investors, the traditional investors that I know, I get it. You guys are never going to go all in. That's fine. But how do you not take 1%? Half a percent, 0.1%. For God's sake, you're worth $10 million. Like, buy 10 grand's worth, right? And not because it's a bit of play money that you might go up, and no, just because it will force you to take a bit more, pay a bit more attention to it. And as I'm just confident that for most people, once you get that first taste, you'll be calling the dealer up for some more pretty soon, right?
Yeah. And speaking of traditional investors, I don't know if you saw this quite recent news, but Ray Dalio now is recommending around 15% to gold or Bitcoin. So
Big
he
Dalio
said
fan,
either
yeah.
or
Yep.
combination of both,
Yep.
which is quite significant. I follow him on Instagram and on Twitter and on LinkedIn, and I love the work that he's done, and how nation states lose money or go broke. I can't remember the exact title of it now. But he very much understands the problem that America is facing with the debt that's completely gone out of control. It's not sustainable. It's not headed in a good direction. I don't think it can be managed. So they're facing some serious risks. So for them, it makes sense. What's interesting to me, though, is how many of the gold bugs who sort of understand hard money and sound money principles aren't necessarily yet orange pilled. I was like, I would have thought that there would be
Yeah.
the easy ones to just like, I get it, but no,
Yes.
they just
Yes.
really like the tangible stuff.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and it is. It is hard, but yeah, it's really odd, right? You would expect them to be the ones who would grok it sooner than everyone else. But look, Dalio, big fan of Dalio. He started the biggest hedge fund in the world. He's been phenomenally successful as an investor, and I was always a fan of his because he had this wonderful philosophy with investing, which was basically, I might be wrong, and my job is and your job, if you work for me, is to convince me that I am wrong. We all seek confirmation bias, and it's just how we're wired. And he recognized that and has structured everything at his firm around trying to disprove an idea. I built an entire business on that very principle, which is, if you can't destroy an investment thesis, it's probably a good investment thesis. I always start with the proposition of, here's something I like now, please kill it for me. And if you can't kill it, then I'm going to buy it because it's probably a good idea. So I love his thinking, and that's how he's come at Bitcoin. I've heard him speak previously about that. But the other thing that's really fascinating about Dalio, and he's unusual in this regard, is that his lens for looking at world events is much broader than most people on Wall Street. In fact, most economists, So if you talk about 1943, as far as any economist who's come out of a traditional institution these days, that was, you might as well be talking about the Stone Ages. Like, completely irrelevant to what we sophisticated modern people are doing and what is relevant to us. But he's gone back thousands of years and just studied history, and it's a general truism for economists in general. The best economists, the best macro thinkers, are informed heavily by history because history is a great teacher. I'll shout out to Russell Napier, who I really like as well. He's from the Library of Mistakes. He owns a consulting firm. He's not a Bitcoiner yet. I don't know. He's got to be getting close. But I love what he says and his framework for looking at the world, because it's that we can sort of, you know, shout at each other all day long as to what we think is going to happen and just be informed by our ideology and just the way we think the world should work. But the people who approach it with armed with the lessons of history just stand on so much more solid ground, because there's something to be said of like, and this is what Dalio does. Look, every single time this set of circumstances has happened in history, this has been the result. Now, it's not physics. It's not a quark or a gluon. Like it doesn't necessarily guarantee that must forever and always be true. But for the love of God, it should suggest that maybe, you know, geez, it's happened every time A has happened, B has followed. It might, at the very least, pay to take that idea seriously. And that's why he's so passionate about where he feels as though it's going, is because he's informed from that experience from history. And if anyone cares to take a look at that stuff, you'll be on a it's a serious competitive edge in investing in economics. But so few people do it because history is over there and economics is over here. But really, you know, one informs the other very much so.
Start saving in Bitcoin with Bitaroo, Australia's biggest Bitcoin-only exchange. Bitaroo offers easy tools and advanced features. Join thousands of happy users making their first Bitcoin purchase today. Download the app or visit bitaroo.com.au. Yeah, I absolutely love that analogy that you've just used, because I think that has meant a lot in my life as well. Understanding the history of money is what made me value Bitcoin. So even though Bitcoin only, you know, got created in 2008 and launched in 2009, you'd think we need to dismiss the history in order to understand it. But it's the fact that I learned the history of money that made me understand why this is now money. This is going to, you know. So it's such an important point to make, and you're absolutely right. I do 100% agree. That's what Dalio shines at, is understanding, like, you know, he always zooms out, and it's the zooming out, looking at, you know, history as well, that makes it so important.
Can I give you another example of that? I'm so sorry. I think there's a little bit of a delay. I'm sorry to talk over you. It's the delay, I think. So I think one thing that's surprising to people, and again, it's surprising because we don't come at it through this historical lens, is that we look at the modern fiat system. In fact, it's not even, for most people, it's not a fiat. So I don't even know what the word fiat is. It's just the system. But the system that they were born into and their parents were born into, you know, it was sort of like eternal and forever, and we've always done it this way. Why are we going to this Bitcoin thing when we've always done it that way? And so I was having this conversation with a friend. I was like, what do you mean? With like, it's less than 50 years old.
Not always.
not less than, but like, well, it's 54 years old. Because it was only in 1971 that we went off the gold standard. And even if you want to be and say, like, we kind of really went off it before that, and arguably we did, it's still, in terms of the historical, the great arc of history, it's such an incredibly recent phenomena to have pure fiat money, and pure fiat really from the 70s onwards, and that shocks a lot of people, and it shocked me when I learned about it. I was like, oh, this is what we're doing now is younger than my grandfather. Like that is not, you know, I was born in 1975. So I was 4 years old, you know, or like 4 years before I was born. We entirely changed the foundation of the financial system. And you feel like something that's seismic and something so consequential would be something that everyone knew about, but no one does, right? And I guess it's just surprising. It's surprising and it's informative. And it's another way, I think, to make even the concept of going to a different system feasible. Because if we've done it before, we could do it again, right? Like it's not something that is immutable and consistent as the night sky that is eternal and never changing, which isn't true, as any astrologist will tell you, right? Astronomer, I should say, soon to add, astronomer. Anyway, you get my point.
Yeah, yeah, and I also wanted to tell you about a story of my dad. So my dad's, he knows that I like Bitcoin. He knows that I'm invested in it, and he sort of understands it, but he hasn't done as much reading and learning as I have. So he's very apprehensive. He's one of those people who they grew up during communism in Yugoslavia, and they learned, their worldviews. You go to the university, you get a good job, you save money, and you retire, you pass it on to the next generation, and so forth. So he's got a very, very cautious view of investing. He's got a very cautious view of Bitcoin, especially because there's like, where is it? Doesn't exist.
Yeah, not real.
So the one of the questions he repeatedly asks me is, are you going to invite people on your podcast who are going to, criticize Bitcoin or offer an alternative point of view? Or are there any debates out there where you get two sides of the story? And I'm like, Dad, it's not that simple, because so far I'm still waiting for the day that someone brings up a good argument against Bitcoin that hasn't been debunked. And that's not me being blind. That's not me being dogmatic. That's just me being honest, as intellectually honest as I can be. I'm waiting for this person. If you are out there, please let me know. But
We are so
I'm
on the
yet to
same
hear.
page. Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
mean that is exactly where I've come from as well. And I always say it to all my friends. It's like I didn't intentionally go in this direction. It's just the inevitable logical endpoint of any reasonable thinking. Now, it's entirely possible. In fact, maybe even probable that in fact, it's guaranteed that there's a whole bunch of things that I haven't contemplated or thought about properly or thought about well. So I'm not arrogant enough to think that, no, I have thought about this thoroughly and fully, and I have conceived of every possible scenario and outcome, and that this is an inevitability, right? Like, no, absolutely, there's something that I could miss. And as I said to you at the start, maybe it's not true, but I'd like to think that if someone presented to me a convincing, cogent argument that, this could go wrong, that I would be open to that, and not just
Absolutely.
for the intellectual rigor, but for my own personal well-being, because I'm pretty deep in the hole at this point, right? And so
Yeah.
it's like, if I say it all the time with Strawman and the investing stuff. If I'm wrong with this particular share or whatever it happens to
Yeah.
be, I'm wrong. And there's two ways I can find out. One way is the market will tell me I'm wrong, and will tell me I'm wrong by me losing a bunch of money. Oh, well, that sucks. Or I could have someone tell me I'm wrong in advance, and I could sell out and avoid the loss. There's no scenario where it's like, you're wrong, but don't worry, bro, it all works out really well in the end. Like, that scenario, there's no third path on that. So yeah, I'll second your challenge to people. If you've got a good argument out there, let's hear it, because I'm ready for it. And it will, if you can convince me, and if I can be open-minded and honest, and I think that I can be, I'll change my mind. Strong opinions, loosely held. And I've got a very strong opinion on Bitcoin. But if the facts, JP Morgan, the man, not the institution, was, and this, I don't know if this ever actually happened, but it's such a good story that I like to use it a lot. Was asked by a reporter what he thought the market was going to do in 20s or somewhere back, 1920s back then. And he said, I think it's going to do whatever. And he goes, but you said this. Last time we spoke to you, you said this. And he said, well, when the facts change, I change my mind. What do you do, sir? And it was just
Yeah.
like the ultimate put down, because what's your retort to that? I mean, there's nothing wrong with having an opinion that is ultimately wrong. The world is far too complex for your original hot take to be immediately and forever right. Like, that is not the world that we live in, and you are not that smart. Not you personally, none of us, right? We just can't be that way. So if the facts change, Yeah, I changed my mind. Like you're gonna, and it's one of these bizarre things in the modern era where if we catch a politician changing their mind, it's a gotcha. Or or even just our friends, you said this and now you said that. Aha, I got you. And it's like I actually applaud it. Anyone who can just dispassionately say, you know what, I used to really have a strong opinion on this, but now I don't because the facts changed or my reasoning changed, but I was able to come at it fresh and I've now changed my mind. It's like, how can you do anything other than applaud that? Because the only other approach is to say, yeah, I made an opinion at one point and no matter what evidence or reasoning or anything that you can throw at, I'm never going to change my mind. That's just another way of saying you're an idiot. Right?
Yeah.
Like, what other conclusion can you draw from someone who takes that stance? And unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there like that. So,
Yeah,
you know,
it's absolutely true. I like listening to science podcasts, and what makes me trust a scientist is his ability to change his mind in light of new information. That's what makes me think, okay, I can listen to this person forever
yep,
because I know that they're intellectually honest and humble enough to change their mind. Um, but going back to the point, I don't know if you've seen, there's a guy, I think he's based in Canada, Anil Said So is his handle on X, and he's got this great visualization, which is like kind of
oh,
a
yes,
tree diagram where, yeah, he's got like
yes,
all the rebuttals to Bitcoin and he organizes them nicely. And I went through each one of those boxes and I was like, I need to make sure I understand and can speak to every single one,
yep,
and I can.
yep.
So until there's something new out there, I am gonna, yeah, I'm waiting to hear this. I have shared some podcasts with my dad because I couldn't find great rebuttals to Bitcoin, but I can find good debates. I found one last night where Safedina Moose debates someone on whether Bitcoin can be a global reserve currency, replace like the dollar, and to me that's like a more nuanced discussion to have when you're kind of
Yep.
hypothesizing how the adoption might evolve from here on out and what that might look like. But in terms of everything that I know about Bitcoin now, that, yeah, I can't hear, like, I haven't heard a smart hater in the space. I'm sorry.
No, yeah. Like my favorite bear case for Bitcoin is that governments around the world adopt an extraordinarily disciplined and judicious fiscal stance. Because if that happens, it's kind of like Bitcoin is something that solves this great problem. Um, but if that's not a problem, then you don't need a solution. So I don't think for a second that that's going to happen because the incentives are the way that they are. Human beings are the way that they are. Politicians are the way that they are. So it's not going to happen. But it is a good thought experiment. It's sort of like we actually don't need this other form of, thermodynamically, mathematically enforced hard money if we just have ostensible hard money just by virtue of like prudent management of our fiscal and monetary affairs. But it's not going to happen. And I think there's plenty of open debates in Bitcoin on the fringe. The op return's a good example of that. There's all kinds of little things, but yeah, in terms of I actually don't know what there is to debate at this stage because it's got this Lindy effect of it's just like, well, despite all of the criticism and all of the reasons as to why it shouldn't work, every 10 minutes it finds a block, it runs flawlessly. It's got the world's biggest bug bounty program on it because anyone who cracks it is going to be an instant gazillionaire, and it's done all of that. Adoption has grown, hash rate has grown, any kind of metric, quantitative metric you want to throw at it that shows, is this becoming used by more and more people? It's only going in one direction. It's sort of like, it's happening. Now, it doesn't mean that it must therefore continue to happen. It might hit an abrupt end, but at this point, it's sort of like if you want to go beyond just trying to argue it from an intellectual standpoint, which is you can cover a lot of. Einstein thought of relativity just by imagining being on a light beam. So you can do a lot just with the old grey matter before stepping out into the lab. But we have this real world experiment that's been running for 16 years now. And for people to deny that, it's like you're looking at the sky and you're saying it's green. And it's like, well, no, it's clearly blue because there it is. Yeah, but I don't acknowledge it. It's like, well, you might not acknowledge calculus, but it exists. You might not, feel as though the French language is real, but it exists, and you might not like Bitcoin, but it exists. And whether you like it or not, more and more people are coming on board with it every day. And that's what's really weird about this is the thing that really broke my brain with it, was that, because again, I come from a world of valuing things through cash flows and intrinsic value, and there is absolutely an inverse relationship between price and value. Apple's a great company. Is it worth 100 times its current share price? Probably not, right? You get to a point where no matter how beautiful the business, you can overpay for it. Bitcoin flips all of that on its head, and it actually says, no, the higher the price goes up, the more valuable it is. And that is just sort of like, that is a really hard thing to wrap your head around. At a higher price, it can carry more economic weight. It's more useful to more people. It's more useful to the big and serious pools of capital that are out there. It just has more utility, and with that will come ultimately lower volatility. It'll be accepted in more places. And it's very unusual to have something like that in the financial realm, which the price goes up and up and up. But rather than the value being inversely correlated, it's positively correlated with it. Like it's so amazing. And so for me, watching the price go up is nice in terms of watching your, making your bags heavier. That's great. I love that. But it's also evidence that this thing is doing what you want it to do. Not for you personally, but what it needs to do to fulfill its promise. And
Yeah.
it is going to go up forever. It is going to go up forever. It's going up forever, Laura. That is something I definitely get sniggers at. And let me give you two things that people in my world snigger at, which is kind of ironic. The first is you say it's going up forever. Because I often get, okay, it's done well. When are you going to take profits? And you're like, profits? No, I'm never taking profits. Why would I change a really good hard currency into a weak crappy one? I'm not doing that ever. And what doesn't make sense? How can anything go up forever? And yet they're the same people who turn around and go, oh, you should buy a low index ETF. Like when? Just now, because it's going to go up forever. And they're right. It is going to go up forever, like for a whole host of reasons we can't get into. But the market has always, on average, over time, gone up. And they can absolutely say, yep, makes perfect sense. Yep, that happened. Oh, but Bitcoin's not going to do that. It's like, so that's weird. And then they'll go, yeah, but it's really volatile. It's like, and the Nasdaq's not volatile? Like that. Like you got to think about that. All of these criticisms that you have, you will in good faith and with good reason, you will advocate to your friends, family, and clients that you should buy, for example, a low-cost index fund, and say with a straight face, it's going up forever, and although it's volatility isn't risk, and you shouldn't worry about it. But if you say the exact same thing about Bitcoin, it's pure madness, right? Yep. Like it's crazy. So anyway, the penny will drop for them eventually.
Yeah. Do you think on the price, like one of the things that I wonder all the time is whether the price itself per Bitcoin, we're not getting into sats for now, but per Bitcoin, do you think that almost is a detractor? Because I know in equities, when you have a stock that's priced ridiculously, people think, oh, this is bullshit. This is like a premium because of some brand or some fluffy metric or I don't know how to explain it, but do you almost think like people think Bitcoin, well, I don't even know what it is now. I work for an exchange. I should. It's like 180 about.
In Aussie dollars. Yeah, let's call it that.
Yep, yeah, Aussie dollars, let's go 180.
Only 180,000 per magic internet.
And do you think that they must, because it's so ridiculously high, like there's no other asset that's priced that high, they must think, oh, this is just too good to be true. It's bullshit. And
yes, I do.
Do you think that's a detractor?
Yes, a unit bias. Yeah, and again, the experience from the world of equities is very informative here. It's interesting, right? Because one, it doesn't stand up to any rational thinking. And I don't mean you have to go down, spend 100 hours of deep thinking and research to arrive at this conclusion, but you can do a pizza analogy or any kind of simple thought experiment and realize that actually the number is arbitrary. It doesn't really matter. And the best example of that is the poster child of equity capitalism is Berkshire Hathaway. Like the Class A shares, I don't even know what they are, but they're insanely high, like 300,000 US. I don't even know what it is. Right? It's a lot. And so Buffett introduced the Class B shares, and there's I forget if it's 100 for 1 or 10 for 1, whatever it happens to be, but they're at a lower price. Now it's completely arbitrary, right? But you needed to do it for liquidity, but more often really just so people don't feel it's too expensive. Every time I think the most expensive stock listed on the ASX, I think it's about $300 a share or something like that. And usually once it starts getting to those realms, the companies will do a stock split. And so they'll just say, for every share that you've got, you now own 2. So the share price halves and everyone goes, oh, it's cheaper. I can afford it now. It's like
magic trick.
And it's like,
is this like a beep on the horizon, Andrew?
Yeah, it's so like, I do get it. I do that's the natural knee-jerk reaction. It's just that it doesn't stand up to any thinking. I was going to say critical thinking. I just mean any thinking whatsoever. So to answer your question, yes, I do think that's a problem. I do think that's the shitcoin angle, really. It's like, well, I miss Bitcoin, but maybe I'm not too late for, whatever coin. So I definitely think that is a part of it. And yeah, people don't know about the divisibility, and it's a stumbling block. But I don't know what you do about it, though. I think the best approach I've had is to, rather than trying to price Bitcoin in dollars, price dollars in Bitcoin. So for example, rather than telling your friends, oh, it's $180,000 per Bitcoin, you could say $1 will buy you 860 sats. I forget what the current conversion is. It's like, what, $1 and I get 860 sats? What's a sat? Oh, it's like sort of cents to dollars, with Bitcoin. But it's Bitcoin. It's effectively Bitcoin. But you'll get 860 for just $1. And it just, you and I feel almost silly saying it, but it reframes it a little bit here. It's like, no, you always price the weaker currency and the stronger currency. So I think as Bitcoiners, we need to really lean into that and stop talking about the dollar value of Bitcoin, because who cares what it's worth in dollars? All I really care about for someone who gets paid in dollars, because they have to at this point in time, is like, well, when I get that, how much sats can I buy with it? And I want that number, ideally, well, when I'm acquiring it, I want as many sats for the dollar as I can. And then after the fact, I want that to go in the other direction. But it's just a framing problem. And it is, look, human nature is human nature. It'll be a hard hump to get over, but people will get there.
Yeah. And I think, owning a full Bitcoin now is becoming harder and harder for most people. So we do need to start communicating in sats. And I know that I don't do it nearly enough as much as I should. Because a lot of people don't even know that they can buy a fraction of a Bitcoin. They think they need to buy, it's all or nothing. So yeah.
Yeah. No, you can buy what you can buy $1 worth if you want. Which is why I sort of like at this point, like, how could you not, like, you'll go out one night with your friends to a restaurant, you'll easily drop a couple $100, but you won't buy some sats. Like, it's weird, right? But people are people.
Yeah, and the other bias as well that people have is like, oh, I missed the train. I only got into Bitcoin last year and I'm up 75%. Like, that's crazy. In 1 year, and it's done really well for me. And I'm really looking forward to the bear market so that I can buy more.
Yep.
Like, I want the price to go down.
So I used to in the very early days, it's hard. I do it with shares too. It's hard to not pull out the phone, look at the app. Has number gone up, number gone down? And I'm so zen about it these days with Bitcoin. And I say it without, I don't want to dox myself, but there's a very substantial weighting into this thing. So my personal net wealth can fluctuate very significantly over the course of a week. And I don't feel anything about it, because I can't lose because any dip is a gift and any pump is also a gift. Like I can see on one hand, I get to stack at greater value. That's a win. On the other, my value, at least is measured in the Pacific peso, goes up. So it's like there's no downside here. Everything is good. Goes up, yay. Goes down, yay. I don't want it to structurally decline into oblivion. Let me hasten to add. But even if it was a 50% drawdown, I honestly don't think I would care that much. In fact, Munger put this really well. Now I know Charlie didn't like Bitcoin, but he was a 90-year-old dude, so maybe we can cut him some slack. But an incredibly smart person and an incredibly good investor. And he was much more blunt than his partner Warren. And I'm gonna screw it up, but he said, if you are not the kind of person that can deal with a 50% drawdown with equanimity multiple times throughout your investment career, you do not deserve to be a shareholder, and you do deserve the mediocre returns that you will get. So it's very blunt. He didn't sugarcoat it at all, but he's kind of saying,
savage.
"Oh, that was brilliant," and I know I buggered that up. So I'd encourage people to Google it to get the exact quote, because he, like Warren, has a wonderfully pithy way of sort of communicating very big ideas. But he's really getting to the point. It's like this is the ticket to the dance. Volatility is not risk, and it cannot be avoided. And if you're going to go and cry and run back to mummy every time something dips 10%, it's just sort of like, well, don't buy it, but just don't complain when you get extraordinarily mediocre returns. And also, volatility only matters when you don't know what you own. If you know what you own and you know why you own it, and you know what it's really worth. I'm not talking about to 8 decimal places in currency, but it's just, no, I own something that is perfectly scarce and fast becoming the reserve currency of the world, is kind of a big deal and will eventually reprice everything. I don't really care that it drops 10 or 20%. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I know, I don't know, don't ask me to give you a valuation on Bitcoin, but it's worth at least several $1 million. So 180,000, 160,000, 90,000, 320,000. Like, what's the difference, right? It's all stinking cheap. And my average buy price is 40 grand Australian. And I bought some higher, I bought some lower, but I can tell you at the time I was way too late. So I have to pay this much, right? And then I got more serious with it, and then I ended up liquidating my super, and then I put it all into super at 100K Australian. Oh my God, it's so painful. I'm at the, why didn't I do it earlier? I didn't think I was too late, because I think I'd grokked it enough by that stage to realize, but it was hard, right? And now I look at, it's so funny how how quickly your expectations and the price that you anchor on changes. So I look at it now and just go, God, I should have got some more, or what? Oh, I couldn't have got more because it went all in. But you know what I mean? It's like, it's so cheap. And I say with my wife all the time, it's like every now and again, Bitcoin does its thing, and it's like war. Nothing happens forever, and then everything happens in a short space of time. And you go through those periods where it's just pumping, and it's like, oh, sweetheart, did you see that? Oh, I got to this. And you always measure yourself from the high watermark. So you're right. In the last 12 months, in Australian dollar terms, we've doubled. And yet, I think the top tick in Aussie dollar terms was, I'm going to say 187,000, something like that. Let me look it up. And right now we're at 176,000.
187 sounds about right. Yeah.
I think the very top, right? And again, I'm zen enough not to care about this at all, but the lizard brain, the monkey brain back here is going, 176. What?
But do you know what?
It's crazy.
Yeah. I also feel like I would be personally more nervous if stocks went down 40% than I would if Bitcoin went down 40%, partially because I understand Bitcoin a lot better, but also because stocks require you to trust someone else. Whereas I trust Bitcoin so much. I trust the fundamentals. I understand that I kind of expect these drawbacks from time to time,
Of
and
course.
I'm ready
Yeah.
for them.
Yeah.
I'm ready to buy more when they
Yeah.
dip.
It's a gift. It's an absolute gift. And let's be real. I mean, how do you think something is going to monetize from zero to the ultimate reserve asset of the world? And it's going to do so in a measured, even, linear fashion? Like, there's no reality in which that's possible. It's going to be messy. It's going to have big surges followed by big crashes. Like, it could never be anything thus. And again, the equity markets are incredibly informative in this regard because that's what they did. And that's what they continue to do, and that's what they will always do, right? No one looks at the stock market and goes, oh, well, it crashed in 2009, therefore we shouldn't put any money in the market. Like, what? Are you an idiot? No, volatility is not risk. So, yeah, I don't know how you get past all of these behavioral biases other than just recognizing them, and it's why the simple things are the easiest things, which is just DCA. When is the best time to buy Bitcoin? Whenever you've got spare cash that you don't need for a few years. That's the best time to buy Bitcoin. Just buy Bitcoin at that point in time. And if you're like me, because we laugh about it at home. It's like, if I have to sell some Bitcoin, but trust me, I never sell Bitcoin, but sometimes I need to spend some of my money on things like a house or whatever, which I did recently. It's very painful. But you know that the moment
everything in Bitcoin.
oh, it's so painful, right? But a house is important to me and I don't regret it. So, and I've still got a decent stack, don't get me wrong, but it was painful to sell. But what do you think, Anja, happened the day after I sold? Like, it pumped 5%. Like, oh, bloody hell. And then you get save up a bit of cash and you go and buy it. What happens the day after you buy it? It falls 5%. Like, that's just the God's fucking, sorry if I can swear or not, but it's the God's fucking with you, right? And that's what's going to happen. And you're going to go, even though you know that this thing is worth millions of dollars, right? You're still going to go, oh, now, like, I can't guarantee anything, but I can be pretty confident that in a few years' time, you're not even going to remember that, right? And
I don't. Yeah, I remember as well, because I only got in last year, so my average was just like under 100,000 Australian, and I was like, oh, I wish I got in like,
super.
Yeah, I was like, I wish I'd got in like around 80 at least rather than 100, and now that we're like past 100,000 US, I'm like, I got in at a really good time. I'll be able to tell,
yeah. And it's a great time now. The point is that even if you're listening to it now, it's still a great time. It's still a great time because it's still cheap. I'm always, and I'm not even going to, I'm starting to try and change my language around that. I don't buy or sell Bitcoin. I exchange for Bitcoin, right? And I never sell my Bitcoin, but very occasionally when I absolutely have to, I do spend some of my Bitcoin because, newsflash, that's what money's for. It's for saving my value and exchanging it at a later point in time. And when things of value and meaning are offered to me and I can spend my money on it, I'm going to do that, right? But I'm not going to sell it. I'm never going to cash out. I'm never going to take profit because it's just it's my unit of account. And so liberating too. Gosh, it just my optimism towards the future has changed. My confidence in the future has changed. My financial grounding is like everything has sort of changed. And let me tell you this, which is really cool from an equity investor standpoint, is that I've done okay out of this equity game, right? Like, I've done I've bought plenty of dumb stocks, too many to mention here, but I've bought a few good ones as well. But it's hard work. Like, it's really hard work. I have to know all kinds of things about various different business models. I've got to know how to read financial statements and actually really read them properly. I've got to have a good sense of what this company's strategy is, the ethics and the capability and alignment of the leaders in charge, how that business is operating within a broader macroeconomic context, what's happening with the cost of capital and interest rates and blah, 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 like a million things I need to try and do and study and work at for me to think I understand this business and then independently come up with a market valuation so I can determine whether the market is offering me a good price so I can buy it, hoping that the other people in the market will recognize the value and push it up. But when that happens, then the value is no longer there and then maybe I need to think about it all again and sell. It's like, if that sounds like super hard work, it is hard work. And before Bitcoin came along, I would still sing the praises of that because it can be very lucrative if you are, again, like with Bitcoin, if you're prepared to do the work, there is great value and great reward in doing that. But when it comes to Bitcoin, it's just like, is the network operating? Back to bed. Like, I don't need to think about anything else. Is adoption continuing to trend upwards, and is the network operating? I don't care about interest rates. I don't care about quarterly earnings. I don't care about, there is no CEO, whatever they're doing, it's just sort of like, and that's why I said at the start, it's so low risk because there's really only, a tiny handful of things that matter, and they're kind of more or less eternal and unchanging for the most part. And as long as that remains true, it makes sense to continue to own it and buy it and expect that adoption will continue to grow. And that means that I can now spend my time trying to deliver real value for the world through my business, through my labor, through anything I want to do. And then I can spend my free time as free time, not as so many people in the Bitcoin space rightly say. I don't have to earn my money twice, one with my job and then by becoming an investment analyst in my spare time, just so I don't lose my money. And it's just sort of like, gosh, that's a liberating thing. And yeah, I don't know where I was going with that point other than to sort of say, it's being a I shouldn't even use the term investor in Bitcoin because I'm not an investor in Bitcoin, but being someone who has adopted Bitcoin, I've got very, very few things that I need to keep track of and worry about to be safe and confident in where my monetary value is held, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. And unlike having to learn each individual stock or equity that you look into and understand the companies behind them and the leadership behind them, you kind of learn Bitcoin once and then you just keep topping up your
Done.
knowledge like a software upgrade every few months.
Yeah. And there's not a lot to keep on top of either, really.
There's-
Like,
yeah.
like, don't get me wrong, there's a million things that we can always talk about and there are, but they're not foundational to the thesis. They're all
Yeah.
like interesting aspects of how it's unfolding, what's happening on the regulatory front. They're all interesting and they're all important in a way, but the big foundational stuff is unchanging.
I feel like this past year for me is like I learned about Bitcoin and now all the news that I keep up with is just good news stories. It's like, oh, look at this mainstream media
Yeah.
changing their tune. Oh, look at this TradFi bro changing his tune.
Yep.
Oh, look at this, like,
Yep.
all these people that were skeptics now absolutely love it. And people who were skeptical of Bitcoin are now saying increase your allocation in it. And so you just keep hearing these good news, which are just validating.
Yep.
And it's interesting because for Bitcoiners, the risk isn't the volatility, it's not regulation, it's not all these things that you would typically think of as risk in the traditional finance world. It's more like your biggest risk in Bitcoin is yourself. Your ability to
Yes.
self-custody
Yes.
is your biggest risk. Get that right and you're sweet.
Yes, you're 100% right. But also I'd add to that, you're being sort of the master of your emotions as well, right? So it's like, yes, you definitely need to get some of those technical aspects right, but also just not be the kind of person who's going to panic. We are fortunate, and this is the danger I think I'm aware of. I don't want to speak for you, Anja, but as I said, I'll take my super balance because I said it's been about a year and it's only gone up since I bought it. So it's easy to be high conviction when things are going up. But again, I've been in the investing game long enough to know that that doesn't always happen. And at some point, I don't know when, I don't know why, I don't know what the catalyst is going to be, but we're going to suffer through a brutal, crippling bear market. And everyone's got high conviction in a bull market. It's easy to say all of this stuff in a bull market. It's very hard to say it when your net wealth is down 50% and everyone's saying it's dead. And it will test you more than anything else, which is why you've got to have that high conviction underpinning, because it is the only thing that will save you from yourself when the demons come at night, and they will come when you're in that kind of environment. And all you can do is just try and think through what that is going to feel like and be ready for it and have a plan for it, right? The plan is probably just do nothing and continue to DCA, but you need to sort of like what's the word? You need to be a precog almost, in this kind of regard, because it's, as I say, everyone's, it's easy to be high conviction and bullish in a bull market. And it's just and I can tell you again, in my game, every single finance bro will go, oh, I would love X, Y, and Z. If that dropped 20%, I'm going to back up the truck, right? Next bear market, I'm going to back up the truck. No, you're not. Bullshit you are. No one ever does, right? Like very few, very, very, very few people do. And because it's easy to say at this point in time, Bitcoin's at whatever we said, 180,000. So if I said to you, hey, if you had the chance to buy it at 90K, would you buy it? It's like, hell yeah, because it's 180, so that's a discount. Like, yeah, but it has to drop in half at that point. So you're looking at a chart that's going south. The screen is full of red. Every part of your social media feed is talking about how it's the end of the world and Bitcoin's over and everything. And you're just going to like quietly, calmly stroll into that and buy it? I don't think so. Well, hopefully you do. But then you start, then the other behavioral tricks start playing with your mind where you'll go, well, I'll buy it once it stops falling, as if you're going to know in advance when the bottom, like no one rings a bell at the bottom is the old saying, right? In the stock market. Yeah. Oh, this is the bottom. Okay. So I should buy now. Like, you're never going to know that the bottom is only in hindsight, and no one ever picks the bottom, right? Picking bottoms gives you smelly fingers is a rather crass way of saying it. And it's going to be true for Bitcoin. So just don't play any of that game. Just like, I'm just going to continue to average into it. Importantly, as much as I'm a believer and passionate about it, I'm certainly not buying any Bitcoin with money I'm likely to need in the near term, because there are bills to pay and the rest of it. So I say the same about the share market. I need to account for that volatility, because it's just a fact of life. But other than that, like you've got, I'm probably just babbling at this point, but another favorite saying of mine is you can borrow an idea, but you can't borrow the conviction. And in a bull market, when there's a couple of people on a podcast who are obviously clearly passionate and excited about this thing, it's very easy to go, yeah, I want some of that too. Oh, wow, it's going, yes. Oh, Andrew said it's going to be worth tens of millions one day or whatever. By the way, please don't buy it just because of anything I have said or anyone has said, because it will be a very different calculus when, not if, but when the market has a bit of a stumble. And that's very different at that point in time. And the only thing that will save you from yourself is if you've got your own deep-seated conviction that you have built through your own research, understanding, thinking, and contemplation. And if you've got that, I wouldn't say you're bulletproof, but you're going to be far more resilient than you would otherwise be. Sorry for the long rambling rant.
No, that's a very, very important topic to make. And I do sometimes get people asking me for like financial advice, and I'm like, I'm not one to give financial advice. All I will say is we are potentially nearing the top of the market, and I want to always be responsible in saying these things to people, because I have had friends who have bought the last cycle's top and then DCA'd all the way down, and just it can be very disheartening, especially if you're buying like a lump sum of your life savings and putting into Bitcoin. But this particular person that I'm thinking of did a lot of study and had very high conviction in Bitcoin, so she kind of laughs it off, and obviously now she's held through the entire time. Yeah, she's held the entire time, and she's I'll definitely back up and then some. But it can be a very disheartening way to enter for someone who's new, only like putting their feet in. So that's why I'm also like a huge advocate of DCA. But in terms of managing emotions, a couple of things that work for me is zooming out. Like you said as well, making sure you have enough operational money spare so that you don't need to panic sell in case that the market dips. You don't want to be selling when it's at the bottom. So always make sure you have enough money for everyday life. What other words of wisdom? Oh, and also speak to a Bitcoiner. Like for me, it helps actually reaching out to like a toxic OG who's been, in like 90% drawbacks, and be like, what did you do? And they're like, oh, we're 30% down. You're worried. Oh, this
bless
is
your cotton socks. Bless your cotton socks.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah,
one of the things I do is I'll open up a blockchain explorer. So rather than looking at a chart, I'll look at one of those,
yeah,
the Bitcoin visuals and stuff. So you just see the transactions coming through and what's in the mempool, and it divorces you from the price, and you just get the zen of the protocol doing its thing, and it's like, oh yeah, nothing's changed, so I guess I don't need to worry.
TikTok next block.
And now if I turned on, it's like, oh, there's a critical error, all the blocks are empty or something. I will probably panic sell at that point in time, right? If that ever happens. But it's a nice grounding just to remind yourself about what is the underpinning of value here. And it really just is the promise of the open, permissionless, blah, 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 all of that kind of stuff. And as long as that is true, the price can move around and I can be pretty zen about it.
Yeah, yeah. I am dying to know, is your wife a Bitcoiner or is she still like, Andrew, what are you doing? Why are you putting our money in this crazy old thing?
She definitely is.
Yay.
I'm so lucky because and she reminds me rightly of this. It's just like, a lot of wives wouldn't have been this accepting and tolerant, especially when it was early, when I was first starting to, like, the mind virus had just got into the head and was doing its thing. And she was like, what are you on about? And, I'd have a podcast playing in the car or just on my phone and in bed, or, just like, what is that? That sounds crazy. But, like, to her eternal credit, she's actually a scientist by training, and so she was sort of like, she would throw out all the usual challenges because they're all sensible challenges the first time, and I was like, yeah, I thought that too, but, and blah 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 blah. Oh, and I'd send her something, and she just accepted it, and not because I told her to accept it, and don't tell her
Yep.
to do anything, frankly. She
Yep.
accepted it because she formed that opinion through her own independent thinking, and just by osmosis of it constantly playing in the background of her house, that she that that she could see the rationale of it, and it just, yeah, it did help that over time it has been life changing for us, and in such a million different sort of ways, that it's hard. It's at a point now where it's sort of like, did you buy some Bitcoin yet? Like, oh, our super came through. Did you buy some Bitcoin? Like, she's 100% on board, and I never could have.
Nice.
I mean, I'm sure I could have convinced her, let's take a small quote unquote position in it, but to be as significantly weighted as we are in it, that could only ever happen if it was, one team, one dream, and teamwork makes
Yeah.
the dream work.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I love those stories of partners like coming around after it beat 100K because it was like your Bitcoin and then
Yeah.
it goes over 100K, our Bitcoin. Like,
I mean, she
but
is
yeah,
at the point where she'll, like, are you listening to another Bitcoin podcast? Like, yeah. She's like, oh my God, like, is there anything left to learn? I'm like, well, actually, yeah. And it's just really interesting. So she's on board, but she's not as myopically obsessed with it as I am. She's interested in far more important things in a lot of ways, but yeah, she's definitely on board.
yeah. And I love as well learning from other Bitcoiners, like what it is about them that interests them the most. And for some people, it's the tech. For some people, it's the economics. For some people, it's entirely something else. And one of the big surprises for me was learning about Austrian economics. And I'm just like, this was my first
Yeah.
exposure to economics. And I spoke to a woman in Palm Cove like a few weeks ago now. And she was like, "You're so lucky. You're so lucky. You skipped all the other BS and
Yeah.
learned, straight from like the Austrian school." And yeah, I never thought I would find this so
Same.
interesting. I
Same.
love listening to podcasts. I actually want to invite some speakers as well to kind of bring this to the mainstream because unfortunately there's not many universities that teach it, and some do, some touch on it because you might have like a professor that's very curious and does a lot of like side education.
Yeah.
But yeah, I tend to look at it as like I look at it as very elegant, neat, and clear, and logical.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd agree
There's
with
not a
all of
lot of
that.
like manipulation behind it. So that's what I like about it.
Zero manipulation, really, isn't there, in terms of the protocol? So yeah, that's what makes it so so fascinating. See, Austrian economics was an interesting one for me too, because it was and is fringe. And when, as a general heuristic, if something is fringe, it's fringe for a good reason. Flat earthers are a fringe group. And you'd go, yeah, but that's because it's bullshit, right? And so most things that are fringe for a very good reason, because they're crazy or some or close to. So when you come across Austrian economics and you go, it's fringe, it's a very reasonable assumption just to go, well, if it's not taught at university, no university teaches it, none of the major economists preach it, it's got to be crazy, because how could something that had any modicum of rationality and sense and reason to it be so sidelined? And it's like, yeah, I totally get that view. And that's why I dismissed Austrian economics for years without ever looking at it, just because it's like, it's fringe. I don't know, what's it about? Something about this and that. It's crazy. What? Oh, if we don't have inflation, no one would spend or invest. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Anyway, back to it, right? And you never think about it. And then you like, as you start exploring it, you're going, it makes so much perfect sense. And the other day I thought, because it's something I love to sort of, I was going to say debate my friends with, I'd call it what it is, argue with my friends about. And I thought, isn't it interesting, right? Because it feels as though, as a Bitcoiner, the burden of proof is on you to make the case, where you could equally say, no, the burden of proof is on you to say it's not true. Like, well, or at least we each have a burden of proof to sort of present our case. But when it came to Austrian economics, I kind of thought, well, economics is, there's lots of journals and scientific articles and people research it. There's university departments full of this. Let's have a look for some good empirical evidence that supports the Keynesian worldview and the effectiveness of it. And you start looking through it and you go, actually, the research on it is extraordinarily thin. And what is there is very, very inconclusive, which kind of surprised me. It doesn't really, now that I've thought about it for half a second, but at the time it was sort of like, I just expected there to be this big body of evidence that, because usually reality is a bit more, it's not so binary. It's like everything the Keynesians say is wrong and everything the Austrians say is correct. No, life's more subtle and contextual and complex than that. So I thought that there would be a bit of heft behind the philosophy. And I couldn't really find anything. And then I even got onto the AI engines and well, they'll know, right? They'll be able to search it for me. It's like, can you list for me all the empirical evidence that gives supporting evidence to this worldview? Even ChatGPT's coming back going, well, can't really find any, right? And so it's sort of, I think that's something else I would sort of say to people is yeah, just because it's fringe, it's a good heuristic, but don't automatically assume that therefore it must be crazy. And in fact, there's no good sort of real world evidence to suggest this kind of stuff is actually reasonable and that it works. And there's so many things like that, particularly in the field of modern economics and contemporary economics, where, and I know it because I work in this field and in this world, and people make assertions and they say it as in fact. And I always nodded along with them. And then you sort of say, well, what's the evidence for that? And then they look at you as in, what do you mean? It's self-evidently true. The classic one being that inflation is good. If we didn't have inflation, the world would collapse and the economy would be in ruins. And you go, okay. And it clearly doesn't stand to reason. Or, oh God, there's 1,000 different things you could kind of say is to disprove it. And yet here we are. And then the only way you sort of square that circle is not many domains of life are like that. Generally speaking, the truth tends to out over time. And the simple and maybe somewhat cynical answer to it is that, never you can't ever expect someone to change their mind when their livelihood depends on them not changing their mind. And when you see where the sort of the center of power and influence are, and that just life is good for the quintillionaires, right? Life is really good. And so that's the reason why Austrian is fringe, because those that are on the good wicket, we're on a good wicket here. Like you know, don't mention the war kind of thing. Like, this is really good, and we will do everything we can to put up quote unquote evidence that we can to support that. In fact, not just try and dismiss it with data and evidence, because they've tried, it doesn't really work. We just sort of try and laugh and make and deride and make fun of the Austrians and paint them all as crazy hardcore survivalist libertarians or something about that to taint the whole field. And the thing that's most surprising about it all is it's actually a super effective tactic. But yeah, I don't know where I'm going with all that, other than to say that, yeah, I was also surprised by that, and I would encourage others who are trying to sort of wrap their head around this stuff. And geez, the Bitcoiners are all seem to be mad about this weird Austrian thing. It's like, yeah, it's pretty unusual and different from what is the accepted norm, but it's also worth looking into, because you might be surprised what you come away with.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very logical and very clean. I actually liked Safadina Moose's podcast on Lex Friedman. It went on for 4 hours, and he goes,
Yeah, I saw
"It's
that too.
economics." He goes, "It's
Yeah.
economics. That's
Yes.
economics. The Austrian school, that's economics. Everything else is manipulation."
Yes. Yeah. And it's
But yeah,
interesting too, because you don't need. I think when you say stuff like that, I'm speaking from experience. Again, it smells very conspiratorial. And usually conspiracy theorists are also crazy, right? It's like the flat earthers. Like, not everything is a conspiracy. There is not a cabal of lizard people at the center of the earth that are, the puppet masters, and, it's just not true. So it's not that. It's not that I really, maybe I'm wrong, who knows, but I don't think it's whatever. What do people say? It's the George Soros of the world out there, pulling the strings behind the scenes. You don't need overt collaboration and coordination for these things. It's really just the organic. What's the word for it? It's sort of, it's an emergent property of a whole bunch of individual incentives, so that all the various, whatever it be, bankers or central bankers or politicians around the world, they're going to zero in on that, just because that's what the game theory suggests should happen and predicts what should happen, rather than we're all coordinating in secret to make this happen. And I just make that point
absolutely.
because again, I'm just hypersensitive to being painted as a crazy conspiracy theorist, because I know how this stuff sounds, right? And I don't think there is a conspiracy. It's just aggregation of misaligned incentives.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, and I have the same view as well. I can, I've worked in corporate, and I can understand how things can just terribly go wrong when you have a large number of people working on something, and it kind of like this thing takes a life on its own, and it builds momentum, and we just kind of carry on, even though we all know it's kind of wrong, but we keep doing it because
Yeah.
it's just too hard to break it apart for what it is. So I don't think there's any conspiracy behind it either. I
Yeah.
think, this is the system that we live in, and it makes sense that universities teach this school of thought, because this is the system that we need to
Yeah.
abstain, essentially. So
Yeah.
not abstain was the word I'm looking for. Uphold. Uphold.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Sorry. Go, keep
no,
sorry.
sorry. So yeah, in that sense, it makes sense to teach that primarily in the school, because we need to equip the future of workforce for central banking as it exists today. That doesn't mean that it's not good to learn other schools and question why potentially this might not be the best solution that there is, and how we might potentially benefit from a deflationary world. Because I grew up very much thinking inflation is great, it's necessary. And now I'm like, interesting, there's people out there who think that's not the case. I want to know why. I'm curious. So it's not about conspiracy, it's about curiosity for me. Yeah.
I loved how you put that. I'm going to steal that, because that's really the encouragement here. It's not to say my ideology is right and I need you to study it. And if you study it, you'll agree that I'm right. It's not. The way you framed it then was more about there's just a different way of viewing the world of economics. And there's another school of thought. At the very least, explore it in good faith, because you might find a couple of good ideas. You may end up dismissing it after going through that journey, and that's fine too. No problem with that. You don't have to agree with anything you don't want to agree with. It's more that point of I'm just going to dismiss it out of hand because it looks in a certain way. And yeah, I just loved how you sort of said it there. Just out of curiosity, if you're interested in economics, hey, are you curious in this? Oh, by the way, there's the Chicago school of thought. There's the Austrian school of thought, kind of closely related, but not exactly the same. There's the Keynesian school of thought. There's a whole stew of different ways of carving it up. And then when you get, this is always the truth of humans, right? If you go to an Austrian conference, there'll be very heated arguments between the Austrians, right? You know, like, so even within the group, there is disagreements, but it is absolutely something that is, at the very least, just be aware of another way of thinking and understanding the world, because you might find some value in it, or you might not, but be aware of it, right? So I think that's a really good point. And something else you said there reminded me of. Oh, that's right. I think the other big challenge you've got with Austrian economics is there is a lot to be said for social proof, in the sense that we're just doing it, and if we're all doing it, then it therefore must be right. And again, remember, there was a time in the Incan Empire where we would cut off the heads of our first child and hope that it would rain, right? And you can imagine that there was someone who might go up to the high priest and say,
wait a minute.
Dude, really? Yeah, but the argument would have been the same. It's like, well, we've always done it. It's always seemed to work out. And you're saying I don't do this? Like, yeah, I'm kind of saying that I don't really think that killing my child is going to help the village here. But you would have, but the social proof of having a society that lived that particular way for God knows how many hundreds of years, you know, and then to sort of question that just by virtue of not being consensus, and just by virtue of the history of that being that way for that long, makes it almost impossible to break. You can say the same about slavery, which was absolutely the normal in human, like the absolute standard in human civilization, going back as far as you want. It's still modern day slavery around today. You know, it's just like, and then at some point someone said, maybe it's not right to own people. It's a pretty renegade idea at the time. And so whenever you're going against such immense social proof, it is always going to be super hard. And so I guess that's another
popular.
No, it's never popular
to be right too soon.
But I say being right early is indistinguishable from being wrong, which actually doesn't apply in this case. But yes, yeah. And it's hard. It is. We are, again, go to our evolution, right? Like, if you're in the village and you disagree with everyone, they're just going to kick you out, and you're going to be alone in the wilderness fighting the wolves by yourself. So we are very much genetically selected to be consensus oriented and to go with what the tribe is saying, which is why most investors are really bad investors, because we all run with lemmings when it's buy and sell and, you know, all the share market stuff that always drives people wrong. It's because of that kind of that desire to be amongst the consensus. But again, don't forget about Bitcoin, right? It's like, we mentioned Buffett and Munger before. Why did they do well? Because they had a really non-consensus way of thinking. In fact, think of any great investor. Stan Druckenmiller, Peter Lynch, you know, there's thousands of them. Like, the one thing they share in common, Dalio's another one. The one thing they share in common is they are independent thinkers. Doesn't mean they're always right, but they're staunchly independent in that they form their views by seeking out fact, evidence, applying reason, and that's how they form their conclusion. Which, when you say it out loud, is like, well, how else do you do it? Well, the reality is most people do it by looking around them and saying, well, everyone thinks that there's man in the sky with a white beard and he makes it rain and does all that. So that's what I think too. And it's just, it just, and I sound like I'm being derisive there. I don't. I just think it's actually, it is our nature to be like that. And there's a very good reason that it's like that. It's just that the evolutionary reasons that made a huge amount of sense in 10,000 BC don't make a lot of sense when you're trying to analyze modern monetary systems and the evolution of capital structures and the rest of it, and just investing in general. So I don't know, what's my point? My point is be an independent thinker, I guess.
And that's an excellent point to end with. Thank you so much, Andrew, for your time. I've loved having you on this podcast. And it's so nice to have someone who has a foot in both worlds, fiat and Bitcoin, and can hopefully inspire more people to pick up a book, listen to a podcast, and get curious about Bitcoin, because it is a gift that keeps on giving, not just financially, but I quite enjoyed all the side benefits, fringe benefits of Bitcoin as well. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me on it. It is a great privilege. As soon as you reached out, I said to my wife, someone wants to talk to me about Bitcoin. I was like, I'm there. That's all I need to know. I don't know. That is it. So any opportunity I get, I don't often get a chance in my traditional life. So thank you so much for the privilege of being able to rant and spray all these random thoughts at people. I do really enjoy it. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. That's it for this week on The Honest Money Show. Big thanks to Bitteroo. Check out why more Aussies are choosing them at bitteroo.com.au. And shout out to our listeners on Fountain, where you can earn sats just by tuning in. If you appreciate the way we cut through the noise, you can support us directly via the QR code in the episode notes. Until next week, take care of yourself and your money.